Hi to everybody who is joining the RSC GRN waiting room right now. We'll begin in just a few minutes. If you want to read this second slide while we're waiting, there are some instructions just to help you clarify how you can interact with the chat function and different panelists. So please take a minute to read this slide and we'll be with you shortly. Hi all, just to let you know again that we are going to begin the seminar in about 1 minute. So if the panelists can prepare to unmute yourselves and turn your video back on, we will start in 1 minute. In the meantime, if attendees can go ahead and read the screen that's up, that would be great. Thank you. Great, thanks, Aliyah. We are ready to begin whenever you are. Wonderful. Thank you. Shaza, if you would like to begin.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, whenever you are all over the world. And here we are. Today, our session is a continuous to our public seminar series regarding to the refugees. And this series is organized by the Refugee Center, Refugee Studies Centers, and the partnership with the GRN, the Global Refugee-led Network. As you all know, I think after this long series, 1 month now, you know that our aim in this series to explore more and more the role of refugee and refugee-led organization and responding to COVID-19 and responding to the crisis instead of or when the lockdown is there and the other international community are not able to do their part, or they are a little bit not able to proceed. In this series, we had the first, I think, the first time ever we are working closely side by side, refugees themselves and the academia. And I think this is maybe the first time, as I know, I don't know, but I hope it's not the last. And during this series, we start talking about the global agenda setting from bottom up. And the second series, we talked about the refugee-led response in the urban context. Then we discover more and more and dig further about the partnership and the working and supporting for refugee-led organization. Then after that, we tried last session to talk about the rapid response to the finding the gaps and seeing where we can support the initiatives. And today, we are trying to dig further as we did for the urban cities last time. Now we will talk about more the camps situation. And today we are trying to see what is the role of the refugee leaders and community and RLOs responding to the crisis and humanitarian stuff, while they are having limited room for resources, limited resources and limited access. So I think we are ready to take off the session now, and I will give it to you over Andonis to give us the instruction for our session today.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Shaza, and welcome back to everybody after last week's break. Before we proceed, I just want to share some quick housekeeping and thanks to the speakers that are here tonight. As you know, the seminar is going to run for about 90 minutes. The first 45, 50 minutes will be dedicated to conversation with the three panelists, and then the last 45 minutes will be dedicated to Q&A and comments from you all. For the Q&A, I just want to reiterate that at the bottom of the Zoom webinar screen, you can see there's a little box that says chat. If you click on that chat icon, there should be a bar that opens on the right side of your screen. If you could all follow along with me and go to the horizontal blue bar, it might say something to the effect of "to all panelists." And I want you to please click on that and shift down to all panelists and attendees if you would like your comment to be public. Otherwise, the rest of the attendees can't see what you have written, and it makes it difficult to sort of communicate back and forth as the Zoom platform doesn't let the attendees see everybody else. You can also use the chat function to introduce yourselves. It's a good opportunity to sort of create onward conversation for networking after the event. Feel free to share your name, your organization, email address, links, etc. in that space. As you know, this has been sort of a record-breaking public seminar series. There are more than 750 people that have registered for this seminar tonight, and many of them are coming from all corners of the globe, from academia, from INGOs, from the UN. Many refugees, stateless, IDPs, etc. are joining us. So it's a very dynamic and good opportunity for everybody to be in contact, which is also to say that among the 750 people who have registered, those of you that have opted in to participate in this sort of network of by refugees participants will get information after the series to carry the conversation forward. One last reminder that the recording from tonight is going to be available after it's finished, so you can share with colleagues or revisit it. The same is true for the past 4 seminars that have been recorded. So if you go to the Refugee Studies Center YouTube site, you can find the 4 seminars there. And finally, I just want to say a thank you to the 3 speakers that have joined us tonight. This has been one of the more challenging seminars to arrange and prepare for because the 3 of them are working out of refugee camps, which, as you know, means that there are challenges with regard to connectivity. So there have been efforts through preparatory calls and through pre-recordings to actually record all of the responses in advance. So in the event that their connections drop, we will still be able to get responses to the questions that we have prepared. Thank you also for making exceptional efforts, Innocent, to go from the camp in Malawi, from Dzaleka camp to Lilongwe, the capital, for the stable connection, to Nhial for also making an effort to reach out to the community radio to get what I think is going to be a secure connection, and to Samuel in Dadaab camp, who has the fortune and position as a healthcare worker of currently being within the isolation centers that have been set up where there is also a stable connection. So please bear with us if there are any technical challenges, and thank you again to all of the speakers and attendees. Please, we'll begin with quick introductions, and we can go in the order of Nhial, Innocent, and then Samuel. So just unmute your microphones and we'll be ready to go. Nhial, please.
Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me clearly. Good. So my name is Nhial Deng. I'm based in Kakuma refugee camp. I'm originally from South Sudan, and I'm the head of the Refugee Peace Ambassadors, a refugee-led initiative. And my work mostly involves providing education and communication consultancy to organizations, and also working closely with refugees in Kakuma.
Hello, everyone. My name is Innocent Magambi, and I call myself a refugee for life because of my experience and the place where I was born. And I work in Dzaleka refugee camp, and the organization called There Is Hope. We provide education, but currently we are really supporting in terms of COVID prevention and preparedness. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. This is Samuel Ouma Mijwang'a. I am a Kenyan working at the refugee camp. I work with Kenya Red Cross Society, which provides medical services to the refugees in If1 camp. I am a nursing officer, and currently I head the isolation unit for COVID treatment in If2 and If1 camp. Thank you.
Thank you very much, all of you, for joining us on behalf of everyone at the Refugee Studies Center. We're now going to look in a bit of depth at the work you all do. And so I'm going to start with you, Innocent, and ask you a little bit about the work of your organization, There Is Hope, and you're executive director of that organization. It's particularly exciting to have you on this call because Malawi is a country that rarely gets a lot of focus as a host for refugees. In many of the conversations, we focus on Kenya, Uganda, some of the big hosts in East Africa. But I was wondering if, Innocent, you could tell us a bit about the work that your organization was doing before COVID-19 in Dzaleka, and what's changed? What are you doing now? So how does the before and after look? And if you could perhaps give a little bit of a sense of the context of Dzaleka, that would be terrific, because it's a camp that I've never been to and doesn't necessarily get the attention of, say, a Dadaab or a Kakuma.
Thank you, Alex. Yeah, so before, maybe as you asked, let me just give the context of Dzaleka. Dzaleka was, a former detention center where political prisoners were detained, and it was quite one of the worst prisons. The name itself means never do it again. So meaning that if you ever get out of Dzaleka, never do it again, because if you come back, you may not be able to get out. And in 1994, the government then, they changed it into a refugee camp, and that's where the first refugees were hosted up to today. It was created to be able to host about 10,000 refugees, but now we have close to, or even over 48,000 people. So the UNHCR and the government are working on, ways to decongest the refugee camp. So before COVID, There Is Hope was involved in providing education, because we believe in finding ways to give refugees a way out of the handout kind of situation for forever. So we try to create ways where refugees can find a new normal. So we do that by providing education, like vocational training, so that when people, graduate after 6 months, a year, they can find a job, or they can even start a workshop, or to be able to find ways to make money and a living for themselves, but also for others. We also provide education in terms of leadership, because leadership skills are needed everywhere. And we believe that when refugees are equipped with leadership skills, they become leaders 24 hours among their communities, because people who work in humanitarian organizations, they have a starting point and the ending point during the day. They start at 8 o'clock and they knock off at 4:30, but refugees are there 24 hours. So if they're equipped in leadership skills and counseling, they'll be able to support their communities anytime. And we also have a social enterprise. It's called Kibebe, where we create crafts and we teach refugees how to execute those crafts, and we sell them locally and internationally. And everything that we do, we try to include Malawians, the local community, so that in so doing, we are creating allies who will support us whenever we cry for advocacy or any issue. We need to have people who have benefited from our organization that can sympathize or understand that we exist to alleviate poverty and support everyone. Now, when COVID came, it felt like everything that we lived on, everything that we have invested for many years will just be wiped away in a single day. But we started by using our social enterprise to make face masks. And so far we have made over 16,000 face masks. And when we started making the masks, it was in the early beginning, and there was not many people in Malawi who made face masks. And the German embassy, when they heard about it, they were like, wow, how can we help? And they gave us 45 sewing machines. And those were enough for us to increase our production and hire more people to make masks. And we have donated about 7,000 to the camp and to the host community, and others we are selling them. And that was like a beginning of us really, shifting from, this sustainable kind of development into really dealing with the actual, threat of COVID and preparing our communities. So we have moved now to providing food, to information, and we are now part of the COVID team with all other international organizations and the United Nations High Commission for Refugees.
Thank you, Innocent. I will ask now Nhial to answer our next question, which is like, from your work, as I understand that you are trying with your team to change the communication strategy approach from up to bottom up, and we did a lot of initiatives, and I think you were succeeded in that. What we are thrilled to know, what is the added value of this? So what the change of this can help the refugees? If you can elaborate more on that. Can unmute yourself, sorry.
Thank you so much. I think I'm good to go now. So having an effective communication mechanism is very crucial for an effective service delivery. And I've seen that from my experience working in Kakuma refugee camp, but also working with others outside of the camp. Because of communication is the most effective way of building trust. And when I look at the NGOs and the big UN agencies working with the refugees, I feel like the main challenge is communication because there's no trust and there's no two-way flow of information between them and refugees. And with this does not happen, this lack of information flow often fuels the perception of a lack of transparency in sharing realistic information about refugee services. And this made the community feel like they are left out and they are not important in whatever is happening. And when there is no trust, services cannot work well. The second thing that I feel like refugees should take the lead in designing these communication strategies is engagement. What I've seen is that I participated in several communication consultation with several NGOs, and what I've seen that it is just a textbook exercise, and people don't really elaborate, more on how this information should be channeled and which channel should be used. And I think when people are more engaged and when they are tell of what is going on and they have, a say on how this information should be shared and how and which channel should be used, because they themselves understand their challenges better, they understand their problem better. And that is why it is crucial that they are engaged well in making sure this information is shared through a trusted source and through channels that refugees can trust and refugees can believe in. And this is very critical because when this happens, and then we have, services and flowing in more effective way, and people, they feel like they are part of this and they trust it most. And that is why oftentimes refugee-led organizations have the most impact, when it comes to the camp setup, because they are more like connected to the communities. They are more, getting deep into the challenges of the people. They are more of understanding their context, and in this way, they're able, to adapt services and program, to refugees adapting situations, and this, help people, have more, trust in the services that are flowing up and down. And I think this are just a few, for why it is crucial that refugees, take the lead in designing these communication strategies. And we have seen that with several, communication strategies that are designed by refugees in several places. For example, there is a communication channel that is designed by refugees, which is very successful now in Rhino camp, and we're working toward expanding that in Kakuma. So it enables refugee-led organization in Rhino camp to monitor, and verify rumors that are, flowing in the camps, which often, fuels and, breach trust between the aid agencies and refugees, and they are trying to see how technology can be used, to more, make these communication channels effective and more, relevant to the context of refugee situations.
Great. Thank you, Nhial, for that very sort of expansive, detailed, bottom-up insight into the way that refugee communications can indeed transform the way that people share information and understand and break down the myths that exist within these type of settings. I think that this is a very relevant sort of theme to liaise into the final introduction with Samuel, who is in Dadaab camp right now, who is working within the public health response, which relies very heavily upon similar channels of communication that you've just discussed. I think we're about 3 months into the COVID response period, and across the 3 camps that you all work in, we're seeing that there are just now being an emergent set of cases for COVID that have developed in the past 2 weeks, 3 weeks in each setting. So Samuel will expand upon this a little bit. Samuel, I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about what the public health response is looking like in Dadaab specifically, and what your organization is doing, particularly in collaboration with the refugees that exist within Dadaab, because as I understand it, there are a lot of community-based efforts that are similar to what Nhial is doing, but that also take a public health approach. So an introduction and then and how you're working with refugees would be wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. If I may start by giving a small background of on the COVID situation in Dadaab. The COVID situation in Dadaab is not as bad as compared to other parts of the country, since it's been about 3 months since the first case of COVID was recorded in Kenya, and since then to date, so far we have recorded 9 positive cases of COVID in the different camps of the Dadaab refugee operation. Now, of these 9, 2 are in Hagadera camp and 7 are in Ifo camp. Now, out of these 9, we have managed to treat cure and discharge 2 cases, meaning that we have 5 active cases in Ifo camp plus now the other 2 cases in Hagadera. And so there has been a lot of activities going on to make sure that we prevent the spread of this virus. And I think that is why we have been able to manage the situation so far to this extent that we only have the few cases recorded. We know we are likely to find more cases in future, and we are still working in order to prevent or to handle the situation. Now, going towards the public health response, public health response is in Dadaab is more of collaborative, and the refugees are the key stakeholders in the public health response in the fight against COVID. There is nothing much that can be done without involving the refugees and be able to succeed in the response. Now, we have quite a number of INGOs in Dadaab, and they provide different services, and each organization provide a service that complements or support the other organization. Now, leading these organizations is the UNHCR, which plays a primary role in leadership. And other than that, it provides funding and logistical support. It also provides technical support and things to do with policies, and also above all, it oversees all the activities carried out by the INGOs. Now, the INGOs work with the refugees at every level. Now, under response to COVID, Kenya Red Cross Society is leading the public health response in Ifo 1 camp. And maybe if I would give it in a nutshell, the response entails basically risk management and infection prevention and control, laboratory investigation, case management, which is about how to handle the cases that have been found to be positive, treating them, how to treat them in discharge. Like yesterday we discharged the two. Other than that, we also do public health surveillance, which is about identifying the cases in the community and quarantining their contacts or isolating them at the isolation facility. And also, finally, there is logistical and supply activities. Now, all the agencies that we have in Dadaab, in one way or another, they take part in supporting these activities towards public health response against COVID. So, in collaboration with the refugees are involved in implementing these activities at different levels. We have activities implemented at the community. We also have activities implemented at the hospital. We also have activities that are implemented at the quarantine center. And so at these different levels, we have refugees engaged in implementing these activities to prevent or to address the COVID situation. Now, uh, in terms of response, again, we have different levels. We have at managerial level or at leadership level, we do have virtual consultative forums where we have refugees represented by their leaders or leaders of different refugee groups. Now, in these forums, they get opportunity to share their opinions, their ideas, take part in making decisions that would end up in informing the response activities towards COVID. Now, among the things that have so far been done, we have established quarantine centers. We have also established an isolation treatment facility where I am currently heading, and we also have different screening points where we screen all the persons who are seeking healthcare services, and the aim of this is just to detect those who might be having signs or symptoms or indicators toward the COVID. Other than that, we are also there are also community structures where we identify individuals who have traveled from outside the camp. Now, these ones are identified, and through these community signals, which are issued by the refugees themselves, we are able to track those who have arrived, put them under quarantine for a period of time. And during this period, we monitor them and test them. Now, those who are negative are allowed to go back home. Those who are positive are isolated. And out of that, the first positive cases we had, the first two positive cases were actually individuals who traveled from Somalia to Dadaab, and through these community signal mechanisms that are held by the refugees themselves, we were able to pick them and prevent the spread into the community. Now, so far, that is in a nutshell what has been happening in collaboration with the refugees. Other than that, we also have sensitization activities. Now, this is community sensitization. We also have digital sensitization. Now, these are carried out by both Red Cross and other agencies, and it is the refugees themselves who do the sensitization. Now, the INGOs provide technical support while the refugees do the community sensitization and the digital sensitization. If I may mention a little on digital sensitization, we have radio where through which the community receive health messages and they get more information concerning COVID on what to do. Other than that, we also have video shows that are organized through TV screens placed in different places, in different points of healthcare services. And now it is the refugees that are doing these setups, and they show the people who come to seek healthcare services on different topics surrounding COVID. Other than that, we also have community sensitization where we have individuals in the community who carry out the role of teaching the community members and showing them how to handle, the suspects or what to do in the case that you suspect that you might be having symptoms that are related to COVID. Thank you. I think I would stop at that.
Thank you very much, Samuel. It's very interesting to hear that perspective of the Kenyan Red Cross and how you're working proactively with refugees and representatives of the community in a participatory way. I want to come back to Nhial and Innocent and really explore the question of how you work with other organizations. I think one of the questions that a lot of people have is how refugee-led organizations work with one another. And one of the really sort of interesting observations we had in our research was the networks that connect refugee-led organizations, that you're not working in isolation, but often there are connections and links in the camps, across the country, and even to other countries. So Nhial, can I start with you and ask you how your organization works with other refugee-led organizations in Kakuma, across the country, and even internationally?
Yes, thank you so much, Alex. From my experiences, I believe that it takes many people together from different experiences and background and expertise to do something great. And I also believe that we cannot transform anything in isolation. And this is the cornerstone of my organizations and all the work that we do. We work closely with different refugee-led organizations in Kakuma. And during the COVID crisis, we are currently running 2 active projects in Kakuma. And one of the projects we're able to organize a consultations for all the refugee-led organizations, where we have most of them, especially in East Africa, attending, and we are trying to explore how we can all work together closely to expand our projects and also to learn from each other and share best practices. And that call was really, helpful, especially in one of the projects that we're running now, which aim toward making sure people in the camp have access to accurate information, but also verifying rumors and also getting back to the people. So we allow people to get to us when they have rumors in the community about coronavirus, and it work with other refugee-led organizations, community leaders, and UN agencies to verify that information, and we get back to them. And that is more of what we learn from refugee-led organization in Rhino Camp, that we're able to attend the call, and it was really eye-opening, because oftentimes these refugee-led organizations are on the sideline, but they often have some of the best initiatives and projects that I believe can be scaled up by this big organization, and that can have a huge impact, not just on refugees, but also on the host community. So that is why I feel like that it is very crucial that we work together closely. And this is what we explore anytime. So we don't just go to them when we have a project at hand, but we get to them when we are designing that project so that they can form the basic of what we are trying to put into place.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. For
you not just working with other organizations, but also learning internationally. So learning from what's happening in camps in Uganda, in Rhino Camp and elsewhere. Innocent, can we come to you now? And how is it that There Is Hope works with other refugee-led organizations? Are there other organizations that you can work with in Malawi? Do you have to reach out internationally? What kind of networks are you working with and through?
Thank you, Alex. I mean, there is hope. I mean, let me just speak on behalf of all the, refugee-led organizations. We understand that our strength, are underrated, and so that gives us, the mindset, the feeling like, okay, guys, for us to be heard, to be understood, for our voices to contribute, we need to kind of have a way of communicating and, sharing the resources. So in Dzaleka or refugee-led organizations, we have started a council, and we meet, and we have a WhatsApp group where we communicate, and we are working on the constitution right now. And last year, we were able to send one of our members to attend, a summit that was organized by refugee-led organizations in Ethiopia. So, and if someone is lacking in a certain expertise, they always, source from other refugee-led organizations, and that's how we share resources. Yeah, currently we are really, working with other refugee-led organizations just to kind of bring together our voices, because the humanitarian space was not created for us to engage, rather for us to benefit. But we are saying, no, we can as well engage because we have something that we are bringing on the table. It's not about us and them, but it's, can we also be recognized as key players? Because your offices are in our homes. Our refugee camps are our homes. So your offices are in our homes, and you need our participation as children of the family. So yes, there is a lot of collaboration, and I believe in the next few years, it will be a movement.
And Samuel, how does it look in Dadaab, in your role with the Red Cross? What do you observe about the ways in which refugee-led organizations work together in Dadaab?
Okay, thank you very much. Now, as I said earlier, refugees play the key roles in this response. And even though we don't have large or big or serious registered RLOs in Dadaab, we have groups of refugees doing a number of activities and supporting these roles. Now, among them, we have youth groups. We also have women groups within small women groups or small youth groups registered within the camp. And the major role that these play are surrounding sensitization and teaching the community or their peers or their members of their group concerning the COVID virus and different topics surrounding the COVID virus. Other than that, we also have groups within the refugee camp who have been facilitated to produce the face masks, which they distribute from among the members of they distribute to among the members of the refugees. Now, other than that, we have other forms of groupings. This include, we have the leadership, the refugee leadership, which is composed of the chairpersons and the section or block leaders. Now, these ones are engaged in helping in enforcing the measures that are put in place towards combating the disease. And this includes helping us to pick the individuals and take them to quarantine if they are supposed to be taken to quarantine, because we occasionally we have some who resist, and through their support, through the leadership support, we are able to put them under quarantine and monitor them. Other than that, the leadership also help us in sensitizing the community, teaching them and showing them and helping them to cooperate with us. Apart from that, we have the religious system within the camp. Now, this also help in sensitization, and we rely on them in dispelling the myths that surround the COVID disease. And with that, we are able to gain the cooperation of the refugees and their support in dealing with the COVID disease. Now, we have one very important category of this group also. Now, the public health structure has a component. Now, the community health strategy utilizes members of the community to provide certain health services within the community or community-based health services. Now, these members of the community that are employed under the community health strategy are called community health workers. Now, we have teams of community health workers who are manning different sections of the refugee camp. Now, these community health workers, we heavily rely on them in one, identifying persons who might be suspected to be having the COVID, and then they are reported, they are either reported or they help them to get to the health facility. Other than that, they help us in tracing the family members of those whom have been held in the quarantine facilities. They also pick signals on individuals who are have either traveled into the camp from outside, like maybe traveled from Somalia or traveled from the capital or the surrounding communities. And when they identify these individuals, we are able to reach out to the individuals, have them to the quarantine center where we monitor them. Now, they can also communicate to those who are planning to travel from outside that when you get to the camp, we will need you to go to the quarantine facility where you will be isolated for some time and then you'll be monitored. So that when these people arrive, they don't have to go and mix with the family members. They go straight to the isolation or rather to the quarantine centers. And so if you can notice, we only have two sources where we can get this disease in the Dadaab. One, those who are traveling from Somalia, and two, those who are traveling from the capital through Garissa and to the camp. Now, we have high suspicion index at the different points. And so we rely heavily on them to pick up these individuals. Now, we also use the community health workers in doing screening at different points to pick those who could be having symptoms. And so that is how we are relying, we are incorporating the refugees in the public health response. Now, outside COVID, we also have refugees who had the opportunity to be resettled abroad, and these refugees have managed to come into groups. And so once in a while, they link up with us and they come and we organize with them through their support or their support and other refugee community group. And they organize things like medical camps or surgical camps. And so through this, they are able to give back to the community or those whom they left behind. So we have had quite a number of such camps such medical services or medical or surgical camps in the camp through their aid. So I think that is part of how we are incorporating or relying on the RA laws in the fight against COVID. Thank you.
Thank you. Shaza, over to you.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you, Samuel, for this. And as I can see from your work, you are well organized and you are doing a great job. And although you have limited, we can say, skills somehow, or what we can say, mechanism and something, but you are leaders. You show that you can do a lot if you have the opportunity, and you did. And this leads me to our last question, maybe in this panel, for all of you. And I will start with you, Nhial. As we see that we have a great job as a refugee leaders, and we did that while the other NGOs have a limited, we can say, access to the community. So how we can ensure the sustainability of this success after the COVID-19, if we can say, and how we can ensure that the changes that happened now remain after this crisis, so we can change the approach of a humanitarian assistant, if we can say, or system.
Yes, I think this is very vital in the refugee context, as we have seen with COVID-19, not just in the Dzaleka, as Innocent was saying, that they were the first, to start producing face masks. But we have also seen in Kakuma the refugees step up first before even the big agencies in making sure people have access to soaps, making sure people have access to face masks, making sure people have access to the right information. And I see that, this is an opportunity for us to try to democratize how we, work with refugees. Because I believe that people should not work for refugees, but with refugees, because refugees themselves understand the challenges more better, and they are more informed. And one thing people should also understand is that when these people fled their countries, they have a lot that they come hand with. They have skills. They have, they have worked in several different contexts, and I believe that the experiences can be adapted to the camp situation. And I also think that the academia can play a role in this by making sure that, the work of refugee-led organization is on the spotlight, because I think, refugees-led organizations are doing a lot, but oftentimes, they're not on the spotlight. No one knows about the impact they're making on the ground. And they often act fast because they understand this context more better. And I think, there is also need to do research on the impact of refugee-led organizations and to try to understand, how they are more effective and how, these big agencies can work together closely with them to make sure that, people, no one is left behind, and people have, trust in these services that are being delivered to them. And, these services, can make more difference in their life, because, you cannot make a difference in someone's life if you don't talk to them, if you don't engage them effectively. So I see that there is need not just to work for refugees, but to work with refugees closely. And in this case, making sure that refugee-led organizations are taking the lead, and, this big agency try to learn from them, try to scale, what they are doing, and try to see how they can adapt their context and the specialists to their operations in every single projects and initiative.
Thank you. Thank you, Nhial. And yeah, knowing that it should be a refugee working like for like refugees is the inherent of the work, like part of this initiatives and everything, and in all levels, we can say, like planning, implementing, and even evaluating the work for refugees. And from there, I would like to ask Innocent, as you already talk about the summit and your all efforts during this summit in Ethiopia, and the collective work that you did so far, what you can say about the gaps, or what is needed to be as a refugee-led organization to be sustainable so far after this situation? So what we need from the community, the global community or international?
Thank you so much for the question. I mean, coronavirus has revealed a lot of things in many ways, in many companies, many countries, many governments. I mean, looking at Africa itself, like so many countries had the ability to produce, to manufacture things like, ventilators and others, but they were not doing it, relying on China, because you order, you get them. But coronavirus has shown that, hey, let's go back and be productive. And I believe that will not end with COVID, after COVID. So I believe the spirit of manufacturing will continue, because that's what we need for development. Looking at the humanitarian setup, I mean, because I've been involved in so many meetings where UNHCR and other implementing partners are, where we discuss things, I never understood until recently that there is guideline in terms of procurement. But during the lockdown and during this era of COVID, many countries, including many agencies, including UNHCR, they have given their local offices to do procurement locally. And this has made things to run very, very fast. Like, you don't expect, if you need masks, you don't wait for Geneva to send them, or for the region office, Nairobi or Pretoria to send. You just source them locally, and that work goes faster. So that is something that I really want to see, happening. I don't know how they will do that, but if they have managed during this lockdown, they can manage to the level of flexibility in doing things. And I'm enjoying the attention that we are getting, CBOs or refugee-led organizations are getting from the humanitarian key players. I like that. I feel like, wow, now we are more engaged than ever. And I feel like that should be the model. So it's something that I really want to see continuously, because refugee leaders are engaged at all levels. So this is something else that I really want. And I feel like the COVID has also exposed the power, the strength, the contribution of refugee-led organizations which I believe was not there to the same extent. So I believe the collaboration will continue, and implementing partners will be able to support refugee-led organizations in capacity building, because those are some of the experts that we have, but we don't. But we have lived experience, and they have, learned experience. So we need to mix them, to bring them together, to strengthen each other. And in terms of sustainability, I mean, refugee-led organizations, it's really difficult for us to fundraise, because the trust that we attract is very, very, very limited. So there is need for us to be, to be supported in terms of building infrastructure that will help us to source funding locally. I mean, we have big dreams, and all the dreams that we have, we always think about how do we involve, get some kind of business that, one, creates jobs for the communities that we are serving, but also bring a level of income that will sustain our project. So I think we need to look at it holistically, and we need support in that regard.
Thank you, Innocent. And yeah, I agree with you on this. So one hand is not clubbing alone, and we need to work together to achieve what we need exactly. And we see that the localization is much important now, and show that it is the right approach so far. I will come to you, Samuel, to hear from you last but not least. Again, what you see that needed to have the sustainable, and what we can do after, how we can keep this after the corona and the lockdown situation.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, I am looking forward to a future where humanitarian responses are refugee-led and refugee-centered, or at least there is some meaningful involvement of the refugees in various activities pertaining humanitarian responses. Now, the current approach towards humanitarian response is that of care and maintenance in the camp. Now, this approach gives very little meaningful involvement of the refugees. And we understand that for adequate, or for some sustainable and some self-reliance, particularly in healthcare system, we would want to involve the refugees adequately. Now, uh, uh, my experience in the refugee camp has taught me that the refugees have a lot of potential, given what they are currently doing to support the healthcare system. And this potential can be tapped, and can be improved, and can be built to be re-engaged back into these services. Now, I'm not talking about involving the refugees in terms of getting their consent, or seeking their opinion or their permission in carrying out the various humanitarian responses. No, I'm not talking about engaging them like as auxiliary workers or community health workers. The refugees have the capacity to work or be engaged in the various responses, just like any other professional. Refugees can work as nurses, refugees can work as clinical officers, as farm tech, or different levels. And they just need some little support. And with this support, or with this little capacity building, the refugees are able to run different sectors of the healthcare system. And of course, there are some efforts towards maintaining this, but I think what is required here is just some little goodwill to support these efforts towards capacity building the healthcare system by using this human resource that is locally available in the refugees. Now, something that we have seen with this COVID outbreak is a shortage in health workers. And in our case, they had to be sourced from different places. I am imagining it were to be obtained from among the refugee members. I think these are their community members and they can be engaged very easily in terms of these various responses. And so maybe we can start by building these capacities through training them. And those who have been trained can be re-engaged back. And so maybe in future, after this, some of you might be reached out to, or others might be reached out to support these already intentions that are being put in place to ensure that this sustainability is somewhere. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Samuel, and thank you to the other speakers for sort of that rounded conversation over the past 50 minutes. We are going to transition now to a Q&A and comment section, and I think where you've left off, Samuel, and the question that you introduced more generally, Shaza, it feeds into a comment that Barbara Mercer made that is very relevant to a lot of the questions that have been introduced. Barbara says to Innocent, I appreciate your comment on INGOs being in your homes. This perspective should help change mindsets and oblige anyone coming to your home to first think of being a guest and operate accordingly. It relates very closely to a question that's asked by Fernanda Carvalho. She says, as many refugee camps are managed by INGOs or governments, what are the challenges faced by RLOs to guarantee that they have leadership in the design and implementation of their projects and initiatives in the camps? So Innocent and Nhial, can you tell us a little bit more about what it is from your perspectives as refugee leaders that can help to broker more meaningful engagement with the INGOs that are in your homes? Please, whoever would like to begin. Innocent, would you like to start?
Let me take that up. I mean, there are several challenges, and which, you know, I already said that I'm celebrating because there is a lot of engagement currently because of the threat of COVID, and you know, the underestimated power or strength or contribution. You know, is now we feel like now we are valued the way we should have been in all those years. So there is need for building on this level of trust, this level of engagement and collaboration, but also, you know, for example, the refugee camp in Dzaleka, many of the people who are coming there, they are coming from Congo, Burundi, Rwanda, Somalia, Ethiopia, where, you know, English is their third or fourth or fifth language. So writing a proposal in English, you know, we don't speak the language of the donor, and it becomes very difficult to get your message across. So the issue of funding, the issue of capacity of training, that the access that we have is very limited. So I think with the support from the international organizations for building capacity and access to funding, it's really crucial to get our contribution to the next level.
Yes, just to add on that, I think what needs to happen, I think, is more, you know, engagement and collaboration between the INGOs and refugee-led organizations, and also I think INGOs should also, you know, try to look into the work of refugee-led organization, because I believe that there are very, you know, many successful initiatives and structured built by refugee-led organization that they can explore, you know, how to expand them, and also they can explore, you know, how to scale them and, you know, make them reach more people, and also even making them global, not just being, you know, structured in one camp, but also trying to take them to other camps, because I've seen that they are very successful initiatives that are designed by refugees that can also be adapted to other refugee contexts and situations. So I think if we have more effective engagement and collaboration between the INGOs and refugee-led organization, that will lead, you know, to having more, you know, refugee-led organization coming to position of leaderships and taking the leads in designing these initiatives and projects, which I believe can be the only successful way that we can have more structured mechanism of delivering services to refugees, led by refugees and for refugees.
Okay, since I am the only female in this panelist, let me bring the voice of female here and ask one question, which is come from Basma Douhi, and she's asking if you can elaborate more on the role of the women in the camps and how the refugee-led organization are amplifying the voices and capabilities. And also she would like to ask another question, which is how we can reflect on how all this intervention bridge the unmet need and dignity from the humanitarian aid. If we can start with you, Samuel, and anyone else after if you need to add.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, at our level, we have different levels of engagement with the refugees, and at all these levels, in all these levels, we have the refugees, or rather the female members of the society engaged, the women engaging at these levels. Starting from the leadership, we have female leaders. We have actually we have the chair lady of the camp, and these leaders are involved in the decision-making roles concerning things to do with management or issues surrounding refugee issues. And so I think we have to some extent some management, some involvement of female. Other than that, we have various points of service delivery, healthcare service delivery, and at these areas, we also have female auxiliary healthcare providers where we engage them in particularly providing those healthcare services that are related to female, like maternal healthcare services or reproductive healthcare services or at the maternity. And so there is some degree of involvement. And so I think it would be more, it would have more effect when we give them meaningful roles, particularly in providing these healthcare services as equal qualified health professionals and not just as an auxiliary healthcare provider and auxiliary staff. Now, where we are currently, we do not have refugee female healthcare workers or refugee healthcare workers at the isolation level. That is because we are trying to prevent or protect them from getting into contact with the infected. So we have, that is why we would not want to engage them at this point. And so we are putting them at levels where there is reduced risk of exposure to the COVID. But otherwise, we have engaged them at different levels and they play equal active roles. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for the question about how refugee-led organizations or the whole thing amplifies the voices of women. I mean, it's quite impressive because, I mean, for the start of There Is Hope, the first implementation, the first project that we implemented was with women. And if we had gotten some negative response or negative experience, I don't think There Is Hope would be where it is. But because those women were so faithful and they did everything according to what we had planned, it really worked. It was a microloan, and many know that microloan, if not well designed, well planned, it doesn't normally work. But those ladies, they did exceptionally amazing. So in many levels, they are involved. For example, there is a friend, he has an organization called Fountain of Hope. The only thing that he focuses on is to support single mothers and widows. So that is dedication. Like, he doesn't have room for men. It's female, it's women. building their capacity. And you also talked about unmet needs. I mean, to me, when you talk about unmet needs, they can't be met by handouts. It's by hand up. So where you give someone the skills and the capacity for them to be able to find a meaningful life, to be able to provide for themselves, to be free, economically freedom that they need to get. So that's exactly what he's doing. That is mission. So there is a lot, even the UNHCR, for the presentation of the camp. Each zone, each community, you have male leader and you have female leader, because that's the only way to be able to get the needs of the community heard, because there are needs that are that a woman would never go to a male leader to tell them, but they go to the female. At There Is Hope, we have a great example, because when we started the vocational training, we wanted to be able to cater for both male and female. However, we didn't have a hostel where women can stay. So we only had like 2 per year. But when the European Union helped us to build the hostel, now we have a lot of number. Like we have about a ratio of, I believe, should be 40% of our vocational training. They are female, because they have a safe space to sleep in, and their families are also safe, that they know that their daughters and their wives are safe. So there is a lot of consideration of amplifying the voices of women.
Just to add one thing on that, most of my work is focused on peace building, and I've worked with incredible women from different nationalities in the camp, and I've seen that the role of women in peace building is very important, because before we go to making peace in a nation, we start from our home, and we cannot really build peaceful homes if we don't have women at the table. And I've seen that also create a safe space for young girls to engage in these projects, because when we have women at the table, this make it easy for more girls, to have access to these services, because they have more trust in them because of the women who are at the table. And I think the women also have incredible ideas that they can bring to the table from their experiences, because they take leadership roles at their own state, which can be expanded to the community level. And that is why I feel that it is very crucial that we have women at the table, working closely with all of us to make sure we design projects that make sure no one is left behind.
Thank you very much, Nhial. We've got a couple of related questions from Jeff Crisp and Hannah Dirks that are about how you manage the challenge of working across nationalities within what Jeff describes as a mixed camp environment. So Jeff asks, in a mixed camp like Dzaleka, how big an issue is mistrust between refugees of different nationalities, and what strategies can be used to address this issue? And relatedly, Hannah Dirks asks, how challenging is it to work across cultural barriers and language barriers, particularly in the context of a public health challenge? So Nhial, I mean, you mentioned you work very much in peace building as one of the areas you work in. How do you ensure you work across the communities in Kakuma? How do you ensure that you're working not just with the South Sudanese communities, but also with Congolese, Somalis, other nationalities? What are the challenges of doing that?
When it comes to peace buildings and, taking experiences before I came to the camp, one of the jargon used by these politicians where I feel like, destroying our countries is that, oh, you are not valued, you are not important, you are excluded. And, this is very fragile when it comes to peace building, because when people feel excluded, and then you can never convince them, to become part of that. And one thing we do is that, the camp is multinationals and multicultural. We have people from different cultural backgrounds. So before we embark on a project, we make sure we engage all the other different nationalities so that we make sure they understand very well what we are going to do. And we also make sure that in every single team, like when we do a project, we try to bring on board volunteers to help us, go deep into the communities and talk to these people. And oftentimes we send people where they much connect with, because we want these people to connect with this person, not just on that work, frame, but also out of that context. And we all achieve this, by trying to bring on board someone who understand them well, or who understand their challenges, who understand their context, who come from that specific, location. So that is what we do. We make sure in every single, a project or initiative we engage in, we have people from all the other nationalities in the camp, including the host community. One project we are working now, we have 30 community ambassadors, and we have all the nationalities in the camp represented. And I think this one builds trust because when people see that, this is not one nationality led, but it is refugee led, and they all come together with that spirit of, believing this is owned by the entire refugee communities, not by one specific, nationality or community or a religious group.
And Innocent, how do you manage the same challenge? In Dzaleka, yes, the majority are Congolese, but you've got people from across the Great Lakes region and the Horn of Africa. How do you ensure that your work is inclusive of different cultures and nationalities?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I mean, Dzaleka was my 5th refugee camp to live in. So I found it quite special because of that uniqueness where refugees are intermingled, and there isn't a section for this nationality. Like everyone is integrated. However, the challenge is you need to look to use interpreters in many cases. The common language is Kiswahili, but not everyone understands Kiswahili. So you need Kiswahili and either Kirundi or Kinyarwanda. In some other cases, you need Kiswahili, Kinyarwanda, and French. And if you have Malawians, it becomes even more complicated. But we try to engage to make sure that no one is left behind. And the strength of it is that, when you have different nationalities, you have different way of looking at a struggle. So people rely, or they build on the strength of others. And you see there is a lot of integration, like there are Somali restaurants, Ethiopian restaurants, like there is a lot of culture exchange, which is really a strength. There was a question, like the beginning of the question was like, have you experienced any mistrust? I mean, the mistrust has been there, but not alarming, because there have been an issue between Ethiopian and Congolese, but that was just a minor issue. But each community has its leader, and when there are issues, they are most of the time resolved within the community leader. So it's really, really a strength rather than a weakness, that I can say.
So at this point, we've reflected on ways in which the lessons that you've all learned and discussed can be taken forward to make more sustainable change. All three of you have also talked about the ways in which you're coordinating with other RLOs or organizations in other camps, in other countries, and at the global level. This is something that Shaza helps to coordinate in her position at the GRN. A question that asks us to look back a little bit comes from Odessa Gonzalez-Benson. She says, how do the current COVID crisis and ways of RLO responses relate to other crises in the past, whether they're environmental, whether it has to do with wars, conflict, other health crises like Ebola? So in other words, what have RLOs learned through past work during times of crisis, and how has that influenced the way that you have responded to this current situation? And this is for all three of you, perhaps. And we can begin with Samuel, if you have any thoughts.
Okay, thank you for the question. Now, I would say that one thing that I have learned from this COVID situation is that we need to prepare get ready our locally available resources. And here, particularly concerning health, I am talking about developing our local systems such that in the event that there is need for an immediate response to such humanitarian situations, we do not need to go look for support from outside of the camp. I mean, we need to start with what we have at hand as we wait for support from outside. And this should start by developing the local systems, developing the local resources, developing the local capacities, either to make things like, continue making things like masks or other items that can be done locally, or developing their skills so that in the event that the qualified personnel are engaged in fighting the pandemic, those who are available can fill in the gaps that have been left by the qualified personnel. And so we needed to build the capacity of the refugees. That's one lesson that I think I am learning from this event. Yeah.
Thanks. And Innocent and or Nhial, do you have any thoughts about how past crises or challenges in your camps have informed the way that you all are responding right now?
I mean, COVID-19 is a unique crisis because it has shaken even the greatest leaders that we know, of the world. So I really can't compare it with anything that we have gone through. I mean, in the past, in 2012, we had a crisis where, there was donor fatigue, which we still experience, and the World Food Program did not have enough food to support refugees. And, we raised the voice, and, many people were involved, including, refugees in other countries, and were able to supply maize. That is like a small kind of crisis that happened in my lifetime as a refugee who is trying to support other refugees. Otherwise, I haven't been in any other experience of Ebola outbreak or anything, but this is quite a magnitude of a challenge.
Just one thought on that. I came across an article last week that said that the COVID-19 has made all of us refugees from our homes. So I think this hasn't been that different for refugees because we have been in lockdown. We have been, through much of what we are going through now before, and that is our daily lives. But I think the most important thing that I've learned from this crisis, and that I felt that refugee-led organizations have tried to structure into the system, is how you can use the resources that you have at hand and and the mechanism to respond before you could even go out to source other more support. And I think that is very important because one of the main reasons why refugee-led organizations have been very effective in responding to this situation is that they have tried to see what they have in place, try to use the mechanism they have in place to respond and to support their communities. And I feel like, much of the big aid agencies were more focused on raising funds instead of, trying to use the resources they have at hand to respond to the current crisis. So I think that is very important, how we could use what we have at hand to respond to a crisis that we have in front of us.
Shaza or Alex, do you have any questions? We have about 10 minutes left to relay final messages.
Okay, I thought we don't have that much time. Okay, I will try to ask in your is a question from Anella from GRN. She asked that in the camps we know that there is some difficulties about the communication and the internet and so on. So how you deal during this time, which is all shifted to be online, how you deal with that barriers and what you can do and how we can support as a refugee-led organization or other international NGOs.
Yes, thank you so much. I mean, yes, we don't have the internet that everyone enjoys, but and that makes it difficult for even the students to learn from home. So the Jesuit Refugee Services that is really the leader in terms of education, both small kids like 2-3 years to secondary school. They use the local radio to broadcast the messages and the courses, and that's what they use. But not every refugee has a radio. So if any support for radios to their students, that will really do great. But also internet facility, yes, there are some levels, but internet is very, very expensive in Malawi. And so that will be really highly appreciated. However, for example, in my case that we're doing is, there is a lady, Cecile, she's a Congolese leader, and she has recruited 50 women, trained them with COVID messages, and their goal is to go door to door to pass the message of COVID. Because although we have 3 cases in the Dzaleka refugee camp, but people are still denying, saying that no, those are just forged information, they're not true. But we know the truth. So that is something that she has put upon herself. I've been doing, spreading the message through WhatsApp groups. So I have a WhatsApp group and few leaders in the community, and that's how we exchange message. And they also pass the message to the people door to door or in their churches or mosques. So we have been able to to be creative in way to disseminate message with our limited resources.
Yeah, just to add on what Innocent said, one thing we did was that when the current situations start getting spreading like a wildfire, is that we came to understand that there was high spread of rumors in the camp because many people don't have access to the right information. And we try to look at how we can make sure as many people as possible have access to the right information with the limited resources we have. So we came up with a number of posters, more than 1,000 posters, and we see which channel could be more effective. And one channel that we identified was refugee businesses. So in Kakuma, there are more than 2,000 businesses that people, visit. Like we have 10 to 50 people visiting these shops on a daily basis. So we work closely with 500 shops across Kakuma and Kalabe Integrated Settlement. And we have put posters in these shops in 4 different languages. So when people come to the shops, they could get these messages. And we also work closely with community leaders in the camp who are elected, and we give them a number of posters that they could give, to people who are disadvantaged, especially the elderly who might not be able to visit these shops on a regular basis.
Samuel?
Okay, if I may add a little on the side, well, with COVID, we understand that, and like people can't have meetings and people can't come together to discuss issues and have ways forward. And so one way that virtual collaborative forums or meetings that do not really need a lot of internet usage, like WhatsApp group, to have meetings and engage the community members in planning on how to have our response strategies. Now, other than that, in terms of sharing information with the community, we are lucky to have radio station within the refugee camps, and so through this, there are times when we share with them messages. Other than that, the children who are currently out of school, sometimes they get opportunity to have learning, periods or teaching programs with the radio station. Apart from that, we have such meetings like Zoom and Google Group. But well, yes, there is the challenge because now it comes with the cost, especially for the refugees who might not be able to raise the cost of acquiring maybe bundles or internet. But that is how we are addressing.
Great, thank you So I think we're in the last few minutes. I'm curious very quickly, because I know that you're all operating in different contexts, but that there are a lot of similarities across camps. I'm curious if you have any reflections, from the Kakuma perspective about what you're hearing coming out from Dzaleka or Dadaab, Nhial, and vice versa for you, Innocent, as well. Do you have any sort of reflections on what you've heard tonight from the others on the panel?
Yes, I think it's eye-opening. Like to get the thoughts from Innocent from the Dzaleka. And this is something I believe very much in. Someone who has worked with different refugees, incredible refugee leaders from different places. I think these are people with huge potential that I think that people can look into how they can harness this potential. To help them. Impact more the communities that they are working to serve. And I have full belief in refugees, taking the lead because I believe that when they take the lead, we'll be able, to see more effective humanitarian response, not just in this camp setting, but even future if it happens to be so. So I think, as Innocent said before, that this crisis has really, exposed a lot. So I think it has exposed a lot actually. Especially on the side of refugee-led organizations, because we have seen that they are more effective in delivering these services and also in communicating with refugees that, there are people they come from and there are people they are doing this for. So I think this is an opportunity, to look into the future and see how we can, have a democratized humanitarian response that makes sure that the people we work for have, have a seat in the table. And not just, as people who are coming there just to listen or participate in a tick box exercise, but key players and actors, in building this system and making sure they are more effective and they reflect more the views of the people that we are trying to serve.
Yeah, thank you. For me, I'm hearing, resilience. I'm hearing resilience because if you hear that Kakuma has over 2,000 business people. There are some people, they feel when they hear refugee, they feel like, okay, it's someone poor who just sits there and waits to die. Or if they're not fed, they die. But you have people who are saying, I have the, the skill, I have the resilience, I have something that I can do to provide a service to the community. I don't have to wait to be spoon-fed at all times. And that's what we are asking to be recognized, but also I think we can do more in terms of collaborating and, platforms like this, they bring us together. I didn't know Neil, I didn't know Samuel, and this is an opportunity for us to even further our relationship and do more together across the countries.
And Shaza, did you want to close up with the last questions?
Yeah, actually, it's not a question. I'm trying to just say that although we are in different contexts, as I am a refugee based in Germany in an urban city, as we can say, I can see that similarity in all of us, which is the lived experience, the motive, and the resilience. And we are trying to challenge our situation. We are trying to be innovative and trying to come up with the new ideas. As I can see when you talk about the lack of internet, how you do like talking on WhatsApp groups, trying to go door by door or something like this. So what I'm trying to say that this is who we are as a refugees. I didn't change. I used to be a UNHCR staff member before, and Shaza, who is a sociologist or whatever, and now a refugee with the same, but added to that a lived experience, more stronger personality, more what we can say skills. And this is what we're trying to let all people know, that we are able, if we have the will from other international player to help us, to work with us. Because as we always say in GRN, nothing for refugee without refugee. So it's about working hand by hand, side by side from refugee side and from the other international community to try to make a better place, a better world where we all are satisfied, we all share our dignity and our rights as we should do. Because as a refugee, we have to have our dignity as anyone. We are a human. We're still a human with a status. Maybe I'm better now because I have more experience stuff. I'm not stigmatized. Refugees sometimes used to be a stigma somehow from others. I used to be sad when I hear refugee, but now when I dig further and what I see, I felt like a refugee is a privilege so far, because I had a lot that I never experienced before if I will not became a refugee myself. It's in a positive way. I'm not saying that I am happy that I have a war or whatever. And also what I'm trying to say that being a refugee, it's not a choice. I was forced to be. I used to be UNHCR before, guys. I never ever thought that I would become a refugee myself. So I don't think that anyone of everywhere can ensure he will not become a refugee. It's something so hard to say and to promise yourself to not be a refugee. It's really hard. So what I'm trying to say that if we all keep the resilience, keep the challenge, and keep the work together and advocate for ourselves and our community, we can achieve better worlds where everyone can enjoy and we have a peaceful life. And I would like to ask all of you guys if you have any reflection towards that, and we can close on this.
Oh, maybe I should go faster. Now, one thing I have learned is that most of these refugees, the refugee camps are protracted, and one thing they're experiencing every year is reduction in funding, and this is likely to continue in future. And yet the refugees are still in the camp and they demand the same services while fund and support is reducing. And so this, with this, I get to appreciate the idea of the global refugee network, which is pushing the idea of buy refugees, meaning that in the event that we are not able, or rather they are not able to get this support, then on their own, they can be able to sustain themselves. And so refugees, particularly in healthcare, that is where I specialize in, they are able to do, or rather provide these services if they get the right training, if they get the right support, which is actually available and the support is there. So we need to focus more towards this, because the support will not continue, and there is also the donor fatigue, and there are also other demanding crises that would require the same fund. So I think it is high time that we shift the focus from the care and maintenance in the camp to sustainable and self-reliant oriented solutions towards supporting the refugees. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Shaza, I envy you because I didn't have your experience. You were, you had a great work before you became a refugee, but I was not, because I was born a refugee. So being a refugee has been something that I have known all my life, and I can't wait to see a level of dignity that refugees will command in the whole world. And the only way to do that is by using allies, like looking at Alex, Andonis, and the university that they work for that has organized all this. They are not refugees, but they are allies of refugees, and that's the way to to get our voices heard, because every movement will succeed because of the allies. And these panels, like 700 people signing on it, and they're not all refugees, because many of them, they want to support, they want to help their allies, have done something. So this is really, it gives me hope, and I'm so privileged to have been, invited to be part of this. My desire is one day to see that refugees are no longer a charity case, but people living with dignity, able to, to lead their lives without anybody saying, how can I help you? But to help them really get to the level where they'll be able to live a dignified lives. I can't wait for all the countries in the world, especially in Africa, for them to be able to accept refugees as human beings and allow them the freedom of movement, right of work, right of education, all those kind of rights. We have potential, and it's so painful that someone is dying with the potential inside them, and yet if those potentials are leashed, like they will develop not only their lives but the lives of the host community. This is my cry. I want allies that will support us to really fight for freedom and for everyone to know that refugees can set the whole world on fire in a positive way.
Those are incredible comments from both Shaza and Innocent. To me, I often see, the term refugees as a badge of resilience, as a badge of dignity. And, what I hope to see is that, there are more opportunities for refugees that recognize their dreams and aspiration. And, people move away from just giving aids and handouts, to giving refugees opportunities, that can let them, to look toward a future filled with hopes and dreams. So I believe refugees have huge potential. We have seen that. I think that is something that we have to say. But often I think we also need really to push hard, and, go to the big people and tell them that, no, we have something to say on this because we often understand, this crisis better. And I think if we have, more of our voices at the global level, I think we'll be able to transform, this crisis, into a more, effective, making sure, people, rebuild their lives and thrive again. So I think we really have to move away from making sure people just survive, because these people need to thrive. They need to rebuild their lives, and they need to look toward a future filled with hopes and dreams, just like anybody else. So I think this is what I hope for, and I believe that this is possible, with the voices like ourselves on this global level, and with people like the Oxford Refugee Study Centers, making sure that our voices are amplified. So I think we hope to see more, organizations stepping up with refugees, making sure they have a seat at the table, making sure their voices are amplified, their stories are heard, because they're incredible stories that are worth being told. And that is one thing I want to focus on, for the next few years. I'm currently doing a course on journalism because I believe that, these stories can change how people think about refugees and try to move away, from the images of suffering and devastation, toward the stories of hopes, toward the stories of resilience, stories of creativity, of contribution, not just to refugees community, but to the communities that host them. And we have seen that, in most situations where refugees are allowed, to become of these communities with more effective policies, we have seen that it has become a win-win solution for both the refugees and those communities. And I think we should look toward, having more of this system and policies, not just in one country in the world, but in all countries, because we have to do this, because it is not just necessary, but I think it is something that we must do. Thank you very much.
These have been incredibly inspiring words to close on. We called this session Limited Room to Manoeuvre, reflecting the challenges of the refugee camp environment. But I think we should have called it Finding Room to Manoeuvre, because really I think that what I take away from this is a sense of resilience, optimism, and vision, that you're all in different ways doing work that is really highlighting that refugees have the capacity to lead organizations that can make a difference. And in Samuel, your case, showing that an organization like the Kenyan Red Cross is there to be one of those allies that Innocent spoke about. I take from this conversation an incredible sense that you all want to work together, you want to collaborate, you want to build alliances, that you want to reach out within the camps, across the countries you work in, but globally, in order to build capacity and support the communities you work with. And I think it's really inspiring that we've also been able to have a conversation between the United Kingdom, Germany, where Shaza is based, and Kakuma, Dadaab, and Lilongwe, where Innocent is calling from, and to be able to bring you all together and have this conversation has been a fantastic example of building those alliances. So I just want to close very briefly by saying thank you on behalf of the Refugee Studies Centre to Nhial, Innocent, Samuel, and also Shaza for co-moderating, as well as my colleagues at the Refugee Studies Centre, Andonis, but also in the background, Elia and Maddie, who have provided a lot of support with the communications and the logistics. And finally, say thank you to all of you who have joined us from home to engage. This is a really important conversation. You've offered some great questions that we can carry forwards. And just a note about what's going to happen next. Next week, we don't have a By Refugees seminar, but we have a Refugee Studies Centre public lecture, the annual Elizabeth Colson lecture, which will be delivered by Professor Laura Hammond from SOAS on a topic not unrelated to the theme of this series. So join us for that. And we will be back in 2 weeks. We've added one seminar to the series, and it's a really interesting topic that we're going to engage with. We're going to speak to refugees who work for international organizations and see what the perspective is of meaningfully working within those organizations as refugees. So thank you, everyone. Stay safe.
Alex, to say that our session is next week and Laura Hammond is the week after, correct? I believe so. I believe that we're scheduled for next week with the final seminar with 3 refugee leaders that are based in Kenya, and then the week after is the Hammond lecture.
I'm going to defer to your logistical competence, which supersedes mine, and just say thank you very much and invite people to check the schedule.
Exactly.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night, all.
Thank you, everyone. It was nice having you. Bye.
Bye.